The protagonist of the story is Kim Soho, who goes by the name Lloyd Fronter in this world. He is a simple civil engineer, and along with his assistant, Javier, they plan to revolutionize the world and turn their land into a source of wealth, earning the title of money-making monster. A few years ago, Kim woke up in a small village and was informed that he had become a supreme being and would now play the role of a character in the Iron-Blooded Engineer novel. As Kim tries to come to terms with his new reality, he realizes that his reincarnation resembles the webtoons he often reads. However, he is confused as to why he woke up with his face in the ground in the middle of nowhere. The constant pop-up windows from the systems irritate him. He was pondering his character's role in the novel until Javier interrupts him. Javier is the main character of the novel and starts out as a regular knight, but as the story progresses, he becomes known all over the continent as the swordsman Javier and the light in front of the hooligans. This will be a nightmare if they went back home. Javier informed Lloyd that he had been drinking during the day, causing him to destroy furniture in the bar. On his way back home, he stumbled and fell to the ground. His father was concerned and sent him home, not wanting to mourn the loss of an unwise son. Lloyd noticed that the ground was incredibly cold, making it impossible for him to sleep. Just as Javier was about to leave, Lloyd stopped him and questioned him about the financial state of his family. Javier, surprised by the inquiry, replied with a dismissive, "That's a new word for me," before storming out of the room. Lloyd knew the outcome without asking, as the Baron and his wife would eventually fall victim to a swindler and take their own lives, losing all their possessions. Lloyd also became drunken and ultimately died after vomiting blood. It was a sad ending, just like his real life. In the morning, Marbella Frontera, Lloyd's mother, approached him about his behavior from the previous day. She instructed him to go apologize for his actions. To everyone's surprise, Lloyd agreed to apologize, but people in the village still avoided him, even children, who warned each other not to look at him. Lloyd needed to change his image quickly, as he had the advantage of living a comfortable life as the Baron's son. He checked for any cheat systems to use, but the only skills he had were scumbag and troublesome drunkard, which must have been a joke. Finally, they arrived at the bar, and Javier took a close look at Lloyd's expression. There was a noticeable change in him since the previous night. He appeared as a completely different person. The inside of the bar was a mess, with broken furniture scattered everywhere. Lloyd apologized to the bar owner, but his actions and behavior had caused the owner to lose trust in him. Despite his apology, Lloyd did not look genuinely remorseful. The bar owner was afraid of him, and his reputation had taken a severe hit. Lloyd asked, "Why is the bar owner upset?" Javier explained, "The owner is upset because Lloyd caused destruction to the bar, which the owner worked hard to acquire. Also, the owner's mother is still recovering from the cold from last winter and Lloyd has now ruined the business." Lloyd felt remorseful for his actions. He was thinking about the fact that they still hadn't discovered the heating system, but then a thought crossed his mind. He realized there was no heating system in this world, but if he could build one, he would be successful. Kim Soho, a civil engineer, had an idea that he was confident would sell quickly. This was due to his experience in building homes and working as a construction worker. He had constructed many houses while serving in the army and had worked tirelessly as a construction worker. Soho believed his background would help him succeed in his new project. He would start by paying off all debts and then return to the bar to place his first order. Suddenly, a new window popped up and his real journey began. The RP system had been activated, which stood for relationship points, which he could earn by improving his relationships with important characters. That changes everything. Lloyd didn't quite understand what was meant by RP, but he knew it had something to do with the key characters. So, he looked at Javier with very suspicious eyes. His favorable impression of him was ridiculously low. He wanted to try something, so he looked at Javier in a very attractive way and said, "You're looking really handsome today." Javier was disgusted by him, and his impression was getting even lower than before. Lloyd knew he needed to stop before he made him angry. They arrived at the bar again, and Lloyd prepared the contract to build the heating system for the bar owner. He would pay for what he destroyed last time through this building operation. However, as expected, the bar owner didn't believe a single word coming out of Lloyd's mouth. He even used the mind wall skill to block any kind of mind manipulation. Lloyd didn't have a choice, so he threatened the bar owner, and then immediately signed the contract without hesitation. Lloyd is such a scumbag. Finally, he got his first contract. Javier asked him, "Why did you threaten the bar owner and force him to sign the contract? This is a despicable act." Lloyd looked at him with calm eyes and told him that everyone expects him to be a scumbag because of what he did in the past. This is why no one will trust or believe him if he tries to be genuine and honest with them anymore. This surprised Javier. When he started to talk with a reasonable mind, he would make the bar owner and his mother happy. No matter what, their smile would be the foundation of his money empire. Lloyd started digging into the ground and hitting it with his shovel. Then he started to build using the wood from his family warehouse. But his body couldn't keep up with him, and he was too tired. However, he quickly got interrupted by Javier. He was surprised by what Lloyd did for the first time. He did something useful in his life. All the parts of his body were hurting, but he needed to keep going. He tried to slice the wood, but when he lifted up the axe, he was about to fall. Javier caught him and took the axe from him. He offered to help and demonstrated his impressive wood-slicing abilities by throwing the logs into the air and cutting them perfectly with his sword mastery skills. Despite this incredible feat, instead of expressing gratitude, he was asked to assist with digging the ground. Javier was eager to find out what was being built, and by working together, they were able to complete the construction quickly. The long-awaited room was finally finished, much to the delight of the bar owner and his mother, who were thrilled with the warm and cozy atmosphere. The room was decorated beautifully with the company's logo on the wall, and the bar owner was grateful to Lloyd for his efforts in bringing a smile to his mother's face. Javier was amazed by the outcome and realized that Lloyd had changed. Despite the room's success, Lloyd faced challenges in convincing people to hire him to build another one. He offered a contract but faced skepticism, resorting to threatening them, until he was interrupted by his father, Arcus Frontera, whose impression of him was -20. During a meal at their mansion, his father asked about his plans, and he explained that he built a heated room for the owner. However, his father warned him not to lie to those who can't tolerate it anymore and reassured him that he will handle the family's situation. Before he entered the world, he had already heard these words. At that moment, he believed that everything was going to turn out alright, but it turned out to be false. He left and encouraged his father to not lose hope and to persist as he would as well. In his room, he pondered about the RP point and how he could utilize it. The system then initiated a scan of him to determine his strengths, and during the scan, it discovered all the information on civil engineering within his mind. As a result, it gave him the capability to utilize his existing knowledge to its fullest extent. The skills he received were based on his existing understanding of basic measurement and design. Having accumulated sufficient RP points, he decided to choose both skills. The first was basic measurement, which enabled him to measure with just his eyes. The second was basic design, which allowed him to rapidly create and design anything in his mind. These skills would prove to be extremely helpful, but he still wished he possessed the knowledge to create heavy machinery or the ability to summon them. The system quickly responded by telling him that summoning was a possibility. Excited by this news, Lloyd asked the system to show him a random draw for a fantasy species, which required 50 RP points, but he only had one remaining. If he was correct, a fantasy species could be anything he desired and would serve the same purpose as heavy machinery. His new objective now was to acquire as many RP points as possible so he could summon his desired fantasy species. As he walked, Lloyd encountered the Lone Shark group, consisting of Meatloaf and Shayla, who walked past him without acknowledging his presence. Lloyd quickly regained his composure. They entered the Baron's office and continued to disrespect Lloyd's father by telling him he had 5 days left to pay his debt, or they would take action. Lloyd listened as they belittled his father. It was the perfect opportunity for him to step in. Meatloaf even threatened to sell Baron's wife and mates if he couldn't repay his debt. The Baron remained speechless in shock, but Lloyd walked up to them and asked if they thought it was acceptable to have no manners just because they were creditors. Meatloaf asked who he was, and upon realizing he was the idiot's son, he told Lloyd not to interfere in adult conversation. However, before he could finish, Lloyd asked to see his invitation letter. Both Meatloaf and Shayla were confused by the request. Lloyd then explained one of the kingdom's noble laws, stating that every noble in the kingdom has the right to protect their rights and interests, and entering a noble's mansion without an invitation is equivalent to trespassing. This was news to Meatloaf and Shayla, who became angry and asked to see proof of the law. Lloyd then called Javier and entered the office. He instructed Javier to cut off the trespasser's arms, causing Meatloaf and Shayla to become frightened and run away, not calming the situation. Despite their threats of going to court, Lloyd was not deterred and was willing to see which side the court would take. They quickly ran away, scared about what they had done. This wouldn't help calm things down. Lloyd put a bag of money on the table and said that it wasn't enough, but it would last for some time. His father told him not to extort money from people. Javier reassured him not to worry and that he would keep a close eye on him. The Baron trusted Javier's judgment and decided to see what would happen. As they walked, Javier asked Lloyd how an ignorant person like him knew about the law. Lloyd replied that he had read it in a novel. After the couple's death, the two loan sharks had wanted to dig for their corpses and sell them. At that time, he had said that Lahi slices the two people's hands. Knowing the contents of the novel was a great benefit, and this was the moment he had been waiting for. The Baron's impression of Lloyd increased, and he now had 61 RP points, as he had planned. He could now afford one of the fantasy species. When night came, Lloyd went outside to use the random draw. He pressed the button and let the magic begin. Some gears showed up, it was amazing. However, there was one problem. The spell was too small and made some nasty noise. At that moment, a cute little animal came out of it. Lloyd was disappointed. He had imagined a strong beast or dragon, but instead, he got a cute little hamster. What a waste of his RP points. The hamster was devastated after hearing Lloyd's disappointment. However, Lloyd was able to understand what the hamster was saying. The hamster told him that he had some wonderful abilities and asked him to show them. The hamster chewed a little and spit out a manual. The manual told Lloyd to take care of him with love and sunflower seeds. The red seed would make him huge and the blue seed would make him small, and the effect would last for 12 hours. Lloyd investigated the situation and fed the hamster a red seed. Once consumed, the hamster underwent a transformation, growing to be 5 meters tall and over 10 meters in size. The hamster now looked at Lloyd with a haughty expression and possessed 3 abilities: digging, solidifying the ground, and a skill called Cheat PA. With these new powers, Lloyd's problem with heavy machinery was resolved. However, Lloyd had to be cautious in showing off the creature as it would raise suspicions. He devised a plan to pretend to be a skilled summoner by bringing a summoner's book. Lloyd was so clever, it almost made him dizzy. The only remaining challenge was the worker issue. Lloyd summoned the Baron's army and expressed his frustration with their idleness. He made it clear that they were soldiers who must listen to him and work to revive the estate, starting with the construction of a heated room. The soldiers looked skeptical, but Lloyd anticipated this reaction. Just then, he was interrupted by the Barony's senior knight, Newman, who asked about Lloyd's actions in commandeering his troops. There are 3 knights in the estate: Newman, Byron, and Javier Azarin, the novel's protagonist. When things started to collapse, this person was the first one to betray and leave the Baron. Not only that, but he also sold information about the Baron to the swindlers. He is the one who has a lot of debt to pay. How can this piece of crap be a senior knight? Newman told Lloyd. He couldn't believe that he made his soldiers do this dirty work. He couldn't accept that as a senior knight. While Lloyd tells him that he got the Baron's permission, Newman said to him that he couldn't understand how he fools the Baron. But looking at your past, it looks like you're using this military for your personal purposes. Newman asked Lloyd if he was wrong about it. To which Lloyd replied, "No, you are absolutely right." Newman was crushing his teeth with anger. Lloyd uses his shovel and splashes a bunch of dirt on the senior knight. All the soldiers were shocked. Even Newman didn't believe what just happened. He became boiling with anger. Did he just try to insult a knight? But Lloyd was pretending not to hear him and mocking him even more. Lloyd took his shovel and pointed it at Newman and said, "Let's go for a duel." Newman had enough from him, and he will regret this. He will absolutely smoke him out. In a month's time, Lloyd will engage in a duel with Newman. He approaches Javier to request lessons in sword fighting, but is immediately turned down. Javier explains that his role is to protect Lloyd, and that teaching him sword skills may put those around him in greater danger. Lloyd then mentions that he has information on a cure for Javier's insomnia, to which Javier is shocked as no one else knows about it. It is revealed that Javier has already read the novel and is aware of everything. He acknowledges that his heightened senses, as he approaches mastery in sword fighting, are the cause of his insomnia and reluctantly agrees to Lloyd's offer. The next day, Javier tasks Lloyd with running 50 laps. To his surprise, Lloyd begins running without any objections. As he runs, Javier thinks to himself that Lloyd will eventually give up, allowing him to dismiss him with the statement, "You don't have what it takes." However, Lloyd's determination impresses Javier and brings back memories of his own hard work from a past life. Javier's approval rating of Lloyd increases by 1 point, and he is now ready to teach him sword fighting. A message appears on screen, indicating the increase in approval rating. We see the Baron having a chat with Newman. The Baron asks him to go easy on Lloyd as he was the heir of the estate. Newman accepts it but has already plotted to kill Lloyd. As the Baron tries to interrupt him, he was also ready to kill both the Baron and Baroness and disguise it as a suicide. 1 month has passed, and we see Newman and Lloyd standing face to face for a duel. The Baron was really worried for his son. Newman asks him if he was ready. He swings his shovel and puts it on his shoulders, with a grin on his face, ready for the fight. And with that, folks, today's adventure comes to an end. But fear not, for there's more excitement to come. So don't forget to spread the word, give us a thumbs up, and hit that subscribe button for the next thrilling installment. In the previous episode, Lloyd challenges Newman to a duel. Javier questions his confidence in winning, to which Lloyd responds by calling Newman a loser and questioning his intelligence. This confuses Javier. After securing contracts for the heating room and receiving permission to use the soldiers, Lloyd picks a fight with the knight, fully aware that he will lose. Javier is perplexed by Lloyd's motives. Lloyd then asks Javier to teach him how to use a sword, but Javier initially refuses, thinking that Lloyd will only cause more trouble. However, Lloyd offers to treat Javier's insomnia in exchange for the swordsmanship lessons. Javier is surprised that Lloyd knows about his condition, which he attributes to the Sword Master Syndrome from the novel. With nothing to lose, Javier accepts the deal. He was certain Lloyd wouldn't be able to get his insomnia under control. He tried everything, but nothing seemed to work. All of Javier's sword talents will now be his thanks to Lloyd's successful treatment of him. Javier had a baby's face in the morning. He slept remarkably well. He ordered Lloyd to do 50 laps. Lloyd made no complaints. That surprised me. Without any issues, Lloyd completed his first, second, and third laps. No matter what, he will keep moving forward. He'd be lying if he said he wasn't exhausted, but this is nothing in comparison to his previous life. He had no relatives to keep him warm. Every day, he carried bricks to the 4th floor and spent the entire night loading trucks with boxes, all with the purpose of providing for himself. He never stopped hoping that things might improve at some point. Remain patient. It will improve. In comparison to then, this suffering and hopelessness are nothing. Lloyd ran continuously throughout the day without complaining. Javier is left with no alternative but to instruct him in the use of a sword in the Baron's office. He and Newman were conversing. He believed that his son's rationality had returned. I must have misinterpreted him, I think. He warned Newman that although he cannot stop this duel, Lloyd is his successor and that he should not be treated harshly. Just get him to his senses again. Newman had the thinking while he was moving that he would kill this jerk regardless of what, and if the Baron tried to stop him, he would just kill him too before leaving this village and moving to a larger area. It appears that his strategy is proceeding more quickly than he anticipated, and he is grateful for that. Finally, the day has arrived after a month. To see this combat, everyone gathered together. When Newman asks him whether he's ready, he responds, "Of course. Be ready to take a beating." He was being made fun of by everyone for entering a sword duel with a shovel. He doesn't take it seriously at all. To him, everything here is just a game. However, because Javier was always by his side, he is the only one who is aware of the truth. Every morning after finishing his basic training, he headed directly to the building site to instruct the other engineer about the heating chamber. He practiced using the sword alongside him during the night. The spirit of someone who is having fun is not what this is. The altercation began. Newman launched his assault, but Lloyd easily put an end to it. The second time he swung his sword at him, Lloyd was able to break up his attack. His movements were amazing. Lloyd didn't pick this shovel at random. He may cut with the shovel's blade and utilize it as a shield. On top of that, you can use it as a pogo stick. This is insane. When Newman lunges at him, Lloyd utilizes the shovel and his sword technique to halt all of his blows. Surely, this is a joke. How does this slimy bastard and drunken prophet grow so strong? Lloyd was utilizing the synchronized tool skill. He is able to unite with the shovel as a result. Newman is at his wit's end. He is left with no other option. All over his body, the mana was flowing towards his heart. Using the mana heart, now that Lloyd's life is about to end permanently, Newman is prepared. He made a full-speed rush at Lloyd before swinging his sword in Lloyd's direction. He will be able to crush his shovel with the help of Newman's strength before breaking Lloyd's skull. The end was near for Lloyd. He accepts the blow, but something is off. The full force of Newman was lost. He presented him with a fourth weapon, this one. The Asmahan core technique, a mana technique, is what made Xavier the strongest character in the book. Using this method, he was able to drain Newman of his mana. Now it's Lloyd's turn. He slammed the shovel into Newman's face so forcefully that one of his teeth flew out into the air. And before he can respond, Lloyd strikes him once more. And to put an end to the conflict, he raised his shovel into the air before hitting the ground and destroying Newman's back head. This is incredible. Nobody has a clue as to what just transpired. The battle was won by Lloyd. Newman endured humiliation. He was instructed by the man standing on top of him that since he had won the duel and you had fallen short, it was time for you to give him what was coming to him. While his father yelled for him to stop, Lloyd continued to beat him mercilessly. To prevent him from assaulting Newman, the soldier fled. Everyone believed he had gone insane. However, if you pay close attention to where he strikes him, you will see that he is hitting him in a certain location. It was as though he had anticipated this. Did he start out knowing everything? However, he earned his victory. He is still being yelled at by his father to stop degrading the knight. After pausing briefly, Lloyd asks his father to peek under the tablecloth to determine whether it actually merits any respect at all. His father discovered some letters, which surprised him when he read them. It contained details pertaining to him and his royal family. How he managed to find this letter startled Newman. His father won't discipline him. To achieve it, he has a good heart. A giant hamster might be thrown at him, followed by his permanent exile. Or we could just downgrade him to the rank of normal soldier, Lloyd told his father. Because of his father's good nature, he chose to lower his status in order to offer him a second chance to atone for what he had done. Newman gives him praise for his kindness. Lloyd is fully aware that a person of this nature will never leave him and his father by themselves. No matter what, he will exact his vengeance. However, Lloyd claimed that this was his final smile. The meaning. of that was unclear to Newman. The red seed is then given to Lloyd's hamster, who immediately launches it into the air. The greatest way to seek for forgiveness is to do nothing, Lloyd remarked to Newman after casting him a hateful and disgusted glance. The hamster grows enormous after consuming the seed. Out of disbelief, everyone opens their mouths. This is impossible. Rel Newman let her one final scream before crashing to the ground. Finally, Lloyd found a permanent solution to the rat issue. Early that morning, Lloyd made the decision to construct a road à la Rome. They will be able to enjoy many local attractions as a result. Javier questions him out of the blue how he is able to summon such a powerful level of magic, and where he learned all this information that they had never heard of before. Is this young master truly him? From the beginning, Lloyd was aware that his suspicion would eventually surface. Before Javier does anything to him, he must act immediately. This issue can only be resolved in one method. Lloyd employs his unique talent for perseverance. Javier and Lloyd had a protracted argument before Lloyd finally persuaded Javier that he was just like him and left. While he was away, Lloyd instructed Brian to take care of the arrangement. He has somewhere to go with Javier. It's time for them to exact justice. The real estate con artist Thords was hiding at a tavern in a little hamlet called Rodinia Estate. Lloyd caused him to lose a lot of money, yet he is still avoiding both Lloyd and the people from whom he stole their money. However, Lloyd bursts through the door. His name is Lloyd Frontra, and as he entered the room, he informed the man that he must know exactly why he was there at this very moment. Thords was in a panic. They jumped through the windows because they had to flee. Javier was ready for them with his blade drawn just before they touched down. He warned them that if they didn't give up, they would be in trouble. Everything went as Lloyd had anticipated. He had to wait in the alley because they would leap out the window. The soldier of Thords is a magician. He employs black magic. Javier will be facing one of them for the first time. The soldier uses magic to attack Javier, but he defeats it with his sword. However, the magician manipulates him with gravity magic. Javier's body was crushed by gravity, but little did he know that Xavier had a mana heart with 3 circles instead. He effortlessly cut through the enchantment. The magician begins to perspire in his face. He then continues running, leaving Thords alone. Javier then confronts him and inquires as to whether he is aware of the penalty for defrauding a nobleman. He'll have to crawl to the court since he'll have his legs amputated. However, Lloyd intervened and stopped him. He warned him that he would also receive punishment if he did that. What he said surprised Javier. Does Lloyd now genuinely feel compassion for someone else? They capture him, tie him to a chair, and begin conversing. Thords pleaded with them to pardon him. Anything he can to get back at them. He was instructed by Lloyd that the only requirement for his forgiveness is that he sign this straightforward contract. But when Thords inquired as to the nature of this arrangement, Lloyd replied, "It's just a job contract. He will even pay him, but only after 520 years, and only after 80% of his salary has been deducted as restitution." As expected, Thord is shocked to the point where he feels like his soul is leaving his body. He can't believe he missed it. He knows he can't kill or take legal action against Lloyd, so he'll have to endure being taken advantage of until he's bled dry. Although Thords believes the contract makes no sense, he has no choice but to sign it himself or face coercion. His life is now in Lloyd's hands, and a few days later, Lloyd puts out a notice for employee recruitment. To his surprise, many people apply for the job. One of the citizens thanks Lloyd for building a heating room that has helped his child avoid getting cold in winter. Lloyd feels ashamed after hearing this, as all he wants to do is exploit poor citizens. The citizens inform him of his siblings in the nearby Racona estate and ask if he can construct a heating room there. Lloyd sees this as an opportunity to charge them double the cost of building the room. He remains the same scumbag he always was. Lloyd talks to Javier and explains that they will eventually need more resources than just the tree. To earn more money, they plan to dig up bituminous coal and sell it at a high price. Although Lloyd asks Javier if he thinks he's being unfair and mean, he's only doing it to pay off their estate's debt. Javier understands Lloyd's motive but tells him that many barons have tried and failed to dig up bituminous coal due to cave collapses caused by weak ground. However, with modern excavation technology, Lloyd believes he can do it easily. There is a lot of preparation to be done. Lloyd has changed a lot from his past ways. However, there is still a threat in the cave, as giant ants with red eyes await their next meal. If you want to see part 3, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss it. Lloyd and Javier stood atop the hill, gazing out at the majestic mountains. Lloyd predicted that the mountains would soon be stripped bare, to which Javier inquired why. Leia explained that the Andal systems required an astronomical amount of fuel, and the current trees would not be sufficient. Lloyd had undertaken the ambitious task of laying down the Appian Way to reach the eastern mountains, where he planned to mine black coal to sell at a high profit and provide a small discount to their fellow citizens. Javier couldn't help but feel that Lloyd's plan was devious and sneaky, but Lloyd insisted that it was necessary to pay off their enormous debt. Javier understood the gravity of their situation but knew that mining coal from the unstable bedrock in the black coal mine was impossible. Lloyd, however, was undaunted and excitedly shared his plan to use the shield tunneling method to extract the coal. Although Javier was unfamiliar with this method, he trusted Lloyd's expertise and began preparing for the tunnel excavation. Lloyd realized that his current skills were too slow and upgraded them using RP points earned from the Newman incident. He arrived at the mine site, equipped with his new intermediate surveying GPR scanning skill, which allowed him to see 5 meters in depth. However, he soon discovered that his current manpower was insufficient to dig the tunnel quickly enough. He considered using Patong, but the enormous man was already weakened from constructing the road and other long-distance jobs. As he pondered the problem, Javier realized that he could summon a new beast using his summon skill. A small portal appeared, and from it emerged a snake-like creature that Lloyd initially thought was meant for assassination purposes. However, Lloyd soon discovered that the creature had unique abilities, and after a few weeks in the mine, they introduced Bangle, the main machine used to excavate into the mine. Before shooting the steel ball as an excrement after digesting the altered ate, it would first consume the ground and create a path. When the turds are launched, Javier cuts them into uniform lengths, and the remaining employees utilize the pieces to continue building the tunnel. Due to the pipes they had earlier constructed, which provided ample oxygen supply to function, Lloyd was feeling faint because there was not enough oxygen in the tunnel. Javier urges Lloyd to take a break and leave the tunnel, but he refuses, claiming that he is in charge of it and is responsible for seeing to its upkeep. He moves farther into the tunnel using his abilities before coming upon the black coal. He applauds everyone and thanks Van Gool for her assistance, which allowed the task to be finished 10 times more quickly than anticipated. He commands everyone to disassemble the shield and expand the mining area as they reach the coal layer, warning that the area is still dangerous and urging them to exercise caution. He was about to say something when the tunnel where they had just exited began to collapse. He attempts to determine what caused it by using his GPR scanning expertise. He noticed a hole that had not previously existed. When the gap widens, giant ants suddenly start to assault Lloyd, but Javier is able to save him. Using his shovel, Lloyd kills the ant after standing up. He assumed the situation was resolved when he realized that ants live in colonies. As a result, the hole became even larger, and they discovered a sizable number of ants. Javier tries to contain the ants for a while till the workers left, but there were over 200,000 of them, making him simply outnumbered. He had to refrain. He thought Lloyd was gripped by panic, but Javier smacks him to force him to act. As Lloyd attempts to make sense of it, a thought occurs to him. He instructs Javier to enter the nest while holding a torch. While Javier believed it to be a stupid notion because they would certainly die, he nevertheless puts his belief in Lloyd and goes into the nest. The Baron learns about the event at his mansion and instantly tells all of his warriors to prepare for battle. Javier is able to hold them both here inside the ant nest for a while, but he is already growing fatigued from the tunnel's lack of oxygen. Javier was defending him as he used his GPR scanning ability to locate something. A loud boom that appeared out of nowhere shook the entire area. The enormous queen ant appeared. Javier was busy chewing the earth when he turned on his mana heart and reached his highest capacity to defend Lloyd. He finally strikes the spot on the camera where methane gas was present. He started sprinting as soon as he told Javier to run to the exit. Under his instruction, Javier too begins to sprint for the door. Lloyd tosses the torch into the nest as they approach the exit, which caused the entire nest to explode because there was methane gas there. The queen succeeded in getting away. Everything was reduced to ashes and just her head remained from the nest. Javier serves as a human shield for Lloyd, receiving the brunt of the explosion's damage. The soldiers and barricade who were there to save Lloyd heard a massive explosion outside the tunnel. The Knight Byron forbids the Baron from entering because he believes his son might be inside. They were now stranded in the mine, and Lloyd had finally recovered from his fright. He now seeks to find an escape route. He wakes up feeling very lightheaded. He is informed by the system that he is running low on oxygen and must leave as soon as possible. He employs the expertise to check for any possible escape routes. The computer displayed how much time he had left to flee. As Javier and Van Gool have been hurt by the explosion and there is nothing he can do except flee, he starts digging it right away with his shovel. Javier was moved by his tenacity and gave him an additional 6 points of approbation. He was unable to breathe because the oxygen levels had fallen dangerously low. In order to improve the Azerhand core technique, he begins by upgrading all of his pre-existing skills. Lloyd decides to upgrade his skill to level 10, which unlocks the Azerhand core technique double circle. However, this drains all of his RP, and the system informs him that his mana amplification has increased by 200%. To aid in his escape, Lloyd uses his Energizer skill and latent power, which allows him to move for 10 minutes without fatigue and triple his mana amplification for 20 seconds. He immediately begins digging an escape route, as the oxygen in the chamber is rapidly depleting. After some time, Lloyd sees the exit at a distance of 3 meters. His Energizer skill has exceeded the 10-minute mark, but he still has his latent power surge skill available. With determination, he continues digging towards the exit. The skill's time limit is only 20 seconds, but he is just 30 centimeters away from the exit when the oxygen in the chamber runs out. Lloyd falls to the ground, feeling certain that he is going to die. Suddenly, the wall in front of him starts to crumble, revealing Padong, who has come to his rescue. The room is now full of oxygen, and Lloyd gets up. Meanwhile, the Baron and his soldiers are on their way to rescue Lloyd and Javier. As they enter the tunnel, they see Lloyd carrying Javier on his back. The Baron runs towards them and catches Lloyd just as he is about to fall to the ground. As the night came to an end, a new day began in the barony and everyone was buzzing about Lloyd's heroism. The young man lay in his bed in the mansion with Javier keeping watch by his side, waiting for him to wake up. When Lloyd opened his eyes, the system notified him of the deep impact his heroic act had on Frontera's subjects, and the significant amount of RP he had been awarded for his achievement. Lloyd's face lit up with joy at receiving the award, and he even gave an evil smile. With the tunnel now secure for coal extraction, the soldiers had built a rail and upgraded the tunnel infrastructure to make coal transportation even more manageable. Lloyd and Javier were in the tunnel, making sure that safety measures were in place for the people mining coal. Although everyone appreciated Lloyd's deeds and looked up to him as their hero, he still felt uneasy. During their walk, Javier inquired why Lloyd was risking his life by doing such dangerous work himself, when he could have ordered his soldiers to do it. Lloyd replied that, as the man in charge, he had to ensure his men's safety, and to do so, he had to be on the front line. He also admitted that nobody would complain when he received most of the money. Javier couldn't determine whether Lloyd was good or bad, and as a result, his approval rating towards Lloyd remained stagnant. As they made their way to the end of the tunnel, Lloyd used his scanning skill to detect anything behind the wall and began to dig through it using his shovel. Although Javier was skeptical, Lloyd remained determined and eventually broke through to the other side, discovering a massive muscular orc and a stockpile of food collected by the ants. Javier explained that the wild ants paralyze their prey and store them for their next meal. Lloyd had a suspicious look on his face, and saw this as an opportunity for something. In the mansion, Lloyd is seen with an orc named Arash, who has now recovered from his injuries. Arash expresses his gratitude towards Lloyd for saving his life and offers to fulfill any wish of his as a token of his appreciation. Lloyd becomes thrilled at the opportunity and asks Arash to provide him with 120 orcs to work in the mine. However, Arash immediately declines Lloyd's request and informs him that only the walrus they respect can give orders to the mighty orcs. Lloyd doesn't give up and comes up with a new plan. He knows that the orcs have to bring the head of the wild ants for their coming-of-age ceremony. Lloyd congratulates Arash on completing the ceremony, but Arash reveals that he was not able to capture even a single ant. Lloyd seizes this opportunity and lies to Arash that they both caught the wild ant, and after tricking it, he was finally able to secure a promise of 120 orcs from Arash the orc. After the conversation, Lloyd and Arash arrive at their destination. A week had passed, and Lloyd and Arash had arrived at the village of the Sand and Steel tribe, where they met with the leader of the tribe. However, the leader immediately refused to give them the 120 orcs they had asked for. Lloyd was confused about why the leader had changed his mind, but he took a moment to consider his options. He then asked the leader a question. "What if I could provide you with meat that lasts for multiple days without spoiling? If the orcs didn't have to hunt 3 times a day, could you lend us worker orcs?" The leader was intrigued by this proposal but was worried about potential muscle loss in the orcs. Lloyd was determined to find a solution to this problem and reassured the leader that he would create a device that would address their concerns. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to hit that like button, share with your friends and family, and subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with the latest episodes. We appreciate your support and can't wait to bring you the next thrilling installment. Previously, Lloyd was successful in rescuing the orc Arash from the wild dance nest by using his cunning skills to trick him into making a deal to employ 120 orcs under him. After a few weeks, they finally arrived at the Sand and Steel tribe of wild orcs where a heartwarming reunion took place between the father and son, shaking the whole tribe with emotion. As a symbol of his authority, the chief head of the humongous head of the queen ant presented Lloyd with a rose, and the entire tribe rejoiced, announcing a celebration. During the celebration, Lloyd was astonished to see the orcs using priceless artifacts as weights for their squats, and he shared his plan with Javier. He proposed to build a refrigerator for the orcs in exchange for their labor and the priceless artifacts. Javier, who was unfamiliar with the term refrigerator, asked Lloyd how he knew about such a thing, to which Lloyd skillfully diverted the conversation. Lloyd and Javier were standing in front of a mountain when Lloyd asked Javier to make a refrigerator. They needed to use granite, which was present in the mountain, to build it. Javier expressed his concern that extracting the rock might take a significant amount of time, which is why Lloyd had brought him there in the first place. Suddenly, Lloyd remembered a chapter from the novel where a city named Nariman was besieged by a powerful force field of dark magic. Within the city, there were many innocent people who needed to be rescued, but Javier was stuck outside the wall, unable to do anything despite being a sword master who could form up to 4 mana circles. However, Javier's determination to save these people led him to adapt and create a new skill using the mana circle. He used 1 circle to protect the man's heart, and the other 3 to channel mana blasts from his sword. This skill became one of Javier's signature moves in the novel. Lloyd maintains a composed expression as he teaches Javier the skill. However, Javier remains doubtful and challenges Lloyd, prompting him to skillfully shift the conversation. Lloyd then urges Javier to attempt the skill himself, and he does so by thrusting his sword into the rock, which results in a massive explosion. Lloyd is surprised at how quickly Javier masters the skill, and as the smoke clears, they notice that Javier's clothes have been torn off. Lloyd subtly asks Javier if the skill will be useful to him, and this impresses him enough to raise Lloyd's approval rating by 3 points and earn him some RP points. The construction proceeds at an impressive pace, with Javier cutting granite blocks and Padong carrying them while orcs and human soldiers also contribute. With their assistance, the construction of the refrigerator should be smooth. However, Lloyd still needs ice and insulation to complete the project, so he dispatches a team to fetch these materials. Unfortunately, they have been gone for 5 days and have not returned. Javier suspects that something may have happened to them, and Lloyd decides to search for them. Javier offers to go alone, but Lloyd insists on accompanying him, as he is ultimately responsible for his workers' safety. After agreeing to accompany Javier, Lloyd and he began searching for signs of the missing men in the vast desert. As they continued their search, Lloyd stumbled upon a hand glove and some straw, which were needed for insulation. Javier, on the other hand, alerted Lloyd about sensing an unnatural mana flow in the area. This immediately rang a bell for Lloyd, who tried to recall the similar incidents that occurred in the novel. Suddenly, he realized the gravity of the situation and urged Javier to hurry up, as there was a possibility that the men might have already perished. As they followed the trail of straw, they arrived at a valley that contained the Lapellin's dungeon, which was a location Javier had already tackled earlier in the novel. The hideout belonged to Lapellin, the dark sorcerer, and Lloyd was furious about him violating his property. As Javier tried to explore further into the dungeon, he was abruptly met by a trap, which Lloyd was quick to avoid. As a knight, Javier was unable to comprehend the existence of booby traps in the novel, which prompted Lloyd to help him navigate through the dungeon safely. Javier stumbled into the dungeon, his body covered in wounds from the traps he had encountered along the way. Despite his injuries, he managed to keep his wits about him and adapt quickly to the danger surrounding him. As he guided Lloyd through the dungeon, he grew increasingly suspicious of him, sensing that Lloyd knew more about the future events than he was letting on. Meanwhile, the sorcerer Lapellin sensed the intruders approaching and assumed they were dead, as he had rigged the dungeon with countless booby traps to protect it. He had been conducting cruel experiments on the people he had abducted, and he announced that the preparations were complete and opened the door to his lair. He grabbed one of the soldiers and dragged him towards a ritual star, intent on sacrificing him with a sickle soaked in blood for 100 days. Just as Lapellin was about to kill the soldier, he was suddenly interrupted by Lloyd's arrival. As soon as the evil sorcerer realized that Lloyd and Javier were approaching him, he quickly used his magical abilities to summon a massive wall that separated them. Trapped in the same chamber, the sorcerer then used his magic to fill the area with sleeping gas, hoping to knock them both out. However, Javier was immune to the gas due to his insomnia, and Lloyd managed to hold his breath long enough to use his energizer skill, which allowed him to tunnel his way under the wall using his shovel. Meanwhile, Javier used his mana blast skill to destroy the ground and create an entrance on the other side of the wall. The sorcerer, seeing their persistence, grew increasingly frightened and summoned a monstrous creature, confident that it would be enough to take care of them both. But Javier was not intimidated. He leaped onto the creature, and using his newly acquired skill, Mana Blast Slash, sliced the beast cleanly in two. Lloyd was stunned at what he saw, for this skill had not been mentioned in any book he had ever read. Lloyd approaches the evil sorcerer and expresses his concern about his loss. The sorcerer apologizes and offers to give Lloyd any valuable tools of sorcery he may have in the cave. However, Lloyd is not swayed by the sorcerer's story and asks him about the hundreds of families he killed. Despite the sorcerer's plea for forgiveness, Lloyd reminds him that he has become a serial killer. He forgives the sorcerer, but warns him that he will not spare him if he ever hurts anyone again. The sorcerer is grateful for Lloyd's mercy and thanks him. Lloyd recalls a chapter from a novel where the villain always attempts to backstab the hero, and knows that the sorcerer will try to do the same. Javier quickly beheads him, preventing any further attempts to harm them. Lloyd has had his fair share of bullies, having been bullied by his seniors in the past. However, he learned that violence must sometimes be stopped with violence when he lost his temper and beat his senior, even though he knew it could cost him his job. This experience taught him that standing up to bullies can sometimes put an end to their actions. As they begin their journey back to the tribe, the workers are exhausted from their ordeal. Lloyd notices this and takes their sack, carrying it on his back to ease their burden. The workers are moved by his kindness, and the soldiers they rescued are also touched by his actions. Word of his heroism quickly spreads far. When Arash checks the chamber, he finds that it is not chilly enough and that storing the meat there will cause it to spoil quickly. In order to finish the structure, Lloyd informs him that ice is necessary. He is informed by Arash that the scorching wasteland is devoid of ice. They will have to make it themselves, Lloyd assured him. Arash is dubious and believes that Lloyd is just an ordinary person, but he tries to reassure him by pointing out that it was Lloyd who saved his life, so he shouldn't view him negatively. He exits the room, promising to assist them if necessary. He is questioned by Javier about who will be making the ice. When Lloyd asks him what they can do, he feels anxious. Javier queries Lloyd about if he intends to mislead the orcs. He becomes more composed after. Lloyd asks him whether he is aware of the traits that unsuccessful individuals have. They try to find reasons why they failed, whereas successful individuals start things and eventually figure things out. That is how an entrepreneur thinks. Javier remains mute because he can't make sense of what he said. In the middle of the night, Lloyd is by himself and attempting to figure out how to create ice. Ultimately, he realizes that he can absorb the hot mana from the water using the Ezerhand core technique, leaving just the cold mana, which will instantly turn into ice. Lloyd is too careless and irresponsible, in Javier's opinion, to pull off such a trick. After that, with the assistance of Padong and Bangul, Lloyd prepares the enormous ice molds and pours water into them. He puts his theory to the test, with great success. After a few days pass, the tribe's leader and Arash are shocked by how chilly the room is and delighted that they won't have to worry about the meat going bad. Javier receives a cocky grin from Lloyd and responds, "That is what it is." Ultimately, Lloyd and Javier are successful in hiring 120 orcs. The tribe's chief expresses his gratitude to him and promises that the Frontera family and the tribe of Sand and Steel shall always be blood brothers. They pose in an incredible way with the tribe. He declares that the Frontera's adversaries will also be regarded as the tribe's foes. Now that Lloyd has been acknowledged as a genuine friend, the orcs are more favorable towards him. Lloyd is very excited and overjoyed with the outcome. He has finally reached the barony after a protracted trek, but this time he is accompanied by large, powerful orcs. When they witness the orcs entering their town with Lloyd, the townspeople are terrified. Due to a massive platoon of orcs waiting in front of their mansion, the Baron and Baroness are likewise terrified. After all was finished, Lloyd examined the items he had taken from the prison of the evil witch. He looked through the goods and discovered a book, which astonished him when he opened it. He instantly sprang up, gathered his tools, and fled the area. He looked for Tords, who was in bad shape and appeared to be weary of the labor, as he made his way to the mine. Tords was offered to be used as a test subject for evil magic to turn him into a ghoul and keep him under control for the remaining 520 years of dead heals by Lloyd, who was there to save him from all of this laborious task. The experiment had Lloyd quite enthusiastic, but Tords did not share his enthusiasm. Because of Lloyd's serious expression, Tords decided to sign the contract. With a smile on his face, Lloyd exited the mine and wished Tords success. Later on that day, the maid told Lloyd that the Baron had two visitors, Mr. Meatloaf and Mr. Shillif. Lloyd appeared to be prepared for their arrival. The Baron and the visitors were conversing about the debt that the Baron owes them while they were seated in the room. In exchange for a reduction in his debt, Mr. Meatloaf asked the Baron to grant him the mine's rights. Once more, they were attempting to deceive the Baron. As the door opened after the knock, Lloyd was standing there with a really delighted grin on his face. The Meatloaf man gave him the official invitation right away and assured him that this time, he was ready to prevent him from forcing them to leave without receiving their money as he had done previously. He was informed by Lloyd that he had not come to scare them but rather to make a counteroffer after hearing about the incredible deal they had made to the Baron. The Meatloaf man informed Lloyd that he did not care about his offer, which irritated the Meatloaf man. Lloyd reminded him that while the two of them could provide bad bargains, he couldn't. It infuriated him, so the Orca Rash intervened, upset, and demanded to know who dared to enrage his brother. The sight of the enormous orc alarmed them both. The Orca Rash warned them that anyone trying to harm their Frontera brother will be dealt with harshly by the Sand and Steel tribe. Lloyd soothed him by telling him that nobody could ever enrage him, and that all he has is a loud voice. Lloyd questioned them about his offer since they were both in fear. They might offend him if they declined his offer. They were forced to accept the offer, and both of them took the opportunity to gain valuable lessons. Lloyd assured the Baron that everything was running nicely, and they will be able to pay off the obligations soon. Yet, there is a significant issue they will have to deal with, and that is the orcs' food. They consume 10 times as much food, and the Baron is terrified that they would accumulate more debt if this trend continues. The orcs were extremely skilled miners, as Lloyd had anticipated. They put forth a lot of effort without even caring about the pay. They simply need to fill their stomachs. In order to buy meat for the orcs, Lloyd was considering where he could find the money. The Baron and Lloyd were talking about this. To raise more money to feed the orcs, Lloyd advised him to exponentially increase taxes. To raise more money to feed the orcs, Lloyd advises him to exponentially increase taxes. The Baron disputes this, claiming that the populace already lives in a situation in which they have little to no money. Then, according to Lloyd, they must create possibilities for people to earn even more money. He advises the Baron to turn the Marshall's marshes into farmland in order to make advantage of the forgotten northern regions, which would enable them to sell enough produce to support themselves. They are able to pay more taxes this way. Javier and Lloyd are visiting the marshes. Javier informs him that these areas are useless because they have been left fallow for centuries. Although Lloyd claims to have a plan to make the area habitable for farming shortly, he actually does not. In order to keep the water level sufficient for farming, Lloyd has been looking for ways to drain the water even when it rains. It has been 21 days since he began his research on the drainage system, and he was working non-stop during that time. The Baron was asked by Javier if he could stop him. The Baron disputes it, and informs him that he does not wish to stand in the way of his progress. After a few days, Baron Frontera's support for Lloyd has risen. After finally achieving his goals, Lloyd is ecstatic and believes he has discovered a means to increase his tax revenue before he collapses to the ground exhausted. The display informs him that he has achieved a new skill, allowing him to build a virtual simulation using the information gathered from surveying the area. After all the effort he put into performing things manually, he was obviously upset that the system had provided him with such a crucial ability. If he simply had this ability from the beginning, it would be a lot simpler. "Are you ready to make a new buddy?" he asks Padong and Bangul as he stands up. When the day begins, Lloyd is prepared to launch his next undertaking, the Wetland Proclamation. He begs them both to assist him in getting rid of the water. They were both concerned, but Lloyd reassures them by saying that he knows it would be impossible for just the two of them to complete the task. He will use his RP points to summon a new creature as a result. When he pushes the button, the gears appear once more and begin to make obnoxious noises, which causes a yellow creature to jump directly in his face and fall to the ground. He finds that the beast resembles a hippo. When Padong and Bangul finally saw the creature, they both became extremely ecstatic and began to dance. They are interrupted by Lloyd, who requests to be given the user guide. Like both of them, the creature spits forth the instruction manual. Sunflower seeds did not make Hammond grow or shrink, therefore he concluded that the experiment failed this time. Although the screen warns him that the summoning game can only be played once each day, he still intends to call another creature. Hammond suffers emotional harm as a result, which enraged Bangul and Padong, who then began a strike. Lloyd then requests that Hammond demonstrate his skills. With his one-shot skill, a monk can down as much water as his stomach will allow in one go. Despite Lloyd's skepticism, Hammond insisted on exercising his talent and began to sip water from the pond. His eyes became larger as he began to swallow the water. Hammond had grown to be as big as a mountain, and he pleased Lloyd by emptying the entire puddle, which astonished Lloyd. He can now remove the water in a few days with his assistance. Patong and Bangul exchanged smug looks. When Ed used summons, he questioned the system to see if he actually always received a random summons. He procured an appropriate beast for the task. According to the algorithm, his special skill may or may not be lucky random summons. Amid inquires about Lloyd's need for more water to be consumed. As tomorrow is the day they would begin announcing the Marshall's wetlands, Lloyd, who was taken aback, urges him to drink to his heart's content. When the soldiers first observed the enormous Hammond and his propensity for ingesting absurd amounts of water, they were all terrified. In a few days, everyone found their footing. First, a man will drain all the water from the marshes, according to the operating strategy. The soldiers next clear the exposed ground of any weeds or rubbish. As Padon compacts the ground to release water from the soil's lowest layers, they then fill the space with sand to create a sandbank. They made straw out of bamboo stalks and only included Ham in one shot. Next, utilizing his improved simulation abilities, they construct a level, and after 10 days of this, they have finished a sector. A bonus celebration will be held after the work is over, which makes Lloyd feel much better and makes the soldiers happy. Javier was thrilled when the wetlands were entirely converted into farmland after a few more days. He also contributed to the work, but even as a worker he is still considering his responsibilities as a knight. Calling his name, Lloyd sprints in his direction. To plant the seeds in that small area over there, Lloyd requests of him. Lloyd explains that it was done to get rid of the bug despite Javier's attempts to deny it. Ultimately, Javier was on his work and thinks next time he will surely deny everything and not fall for this scam again. Everyone was thrilled and amazed at the transformation of Lloyd from a drunkard to the person he had become. The authorities informed him that the people in the barony held him in high regard for his incredible work and had rewarded him with a substantial bonus RP. Lloyd was content with this. After a few days, Knight Javier had successfully nurtured the plants, and Lloyd suggested that he could now build a water wheel to prevent flooding during heavy rain. Javier was unfamiliar with the term and asked for clarification, to which Lloyd explained its purpose. Suddenly, they heard some commotion in the distance, and they saw a group of men on horses approaching them. Lloyd asked Javier about their identity, and Javier identified them as Viscount Lacona and his knights from the north of the Marshall wetlands. The Viscount's knight inquired about the project's supervisor, to which Javier became outraged and demanded respect. The knight demanded that they vacate the land as it was Viscount Lacona's property, and the scene ended there. Thanks for tuning in. If you liked it, smash the like button, share with your loved ones, and subscribe to stay up to date. Your support means everything, and we're excited to bring you the next exciting episode.